Act 1, Scene 1. We start off the play on a London street. You'll notice, actually, before I start, there's numbers in the text here, and these just refer to the line number, so we can keep track of where we are as we progress. So anyway, yes, London, a street. Enter Richard III, who's the Duke of Gloucester, and he's alone. This is Richard. He's on the stage, and this is what he says. Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the son of York. This is a very famous line that's often misquoted. Most people think Richard is really depressed in this first line, but then you read the second line and it indicates otherwise. Things are glorious. These two lines are metaphors, with Richard saying that everything bad that happened before during the winter of discontent, which sounds terrible, has been taken away and has been made into a glorious summer by this guy who's the son of York. So a metaphor. It's our first figure of speech. It's actually the first figure of speech in this play. And a metaphor is when you compare one thing to another without the use of like or as. So you can't use the word like or as. Richard compares the terrible times of the past like it was a winter, and compares the current time now like it's summertime. It's bright, it's sunny, everything is good in London. There's another figure of speech in here. The word sun here really refers to the big ball of burning flame in the sky, but it also refers to the man who is the son, S-O-N, of York, whom we have not been introduced to yet. We have the word summer here. It reminds us of sunshine, and this son of York, who is like the bright yellow sun. He's made things better and brighter, and so this is called a pun. It's another figure of speech. Pun, it's a kind of joke that exploits the different meanings of a word, especially words that sound alike but have different meanings, like sun and sun. Shakespeare does this a lot. And you know what, I'll give you a quick spoiler here before we keep going. The son of York that he's referring to here is actually, we soon find out, his brother Edward. He's talking about his brother who is now king. He is the son of York. And all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Again, more metaphors. The enemies of the York family are like clouds lowered over the house of York, and they've been buried in the ocean. All the issues of the past have been buried in the ocean, tucked away. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. That's a great line. So now everyone's brows are surrounded by victorious wreaths. You can think about wreaths around people's heads. A brow is your forehead. There's a celebration of sorts happening. Everyone's merry. Then here we have all kinds of contrasts, right? Our bruised arms, so our battered weapons. It means our arms are not like our arms and legs. Our arms as in our spears and our swords. Our bruised arms hung up for monuments. So we've hung up our swords as decorations. Our stern alarms, alarms being calls to arms, calls to fight, have changed to merry meetings. Our dreadful marches, so our marches to war, to battle, have changed to delightful measures. So Shakespeare here is using contrasts. He's describing the differences between two or more things to show how much has changed for Richard and his family for the better. So things are good. Things used to be bad, now they're good. We also have alliteration here. Alliteration is another figure of speech. Alliteration, I think this is how you spell it. It's the repetition of the same sounds, or of the same kinds of sounds at the beginning of words. So look at all the M's that are repeated here. Our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. So Shakespeare uses all these M's on purpose to make everything sound much richer and more impactful, and also a little sinister. It sounds a little like evil, all these terrible things happening, but now there's all these happy things going on. We have rhyme in here as well. Rhyme is another one of Shakespeare's tools. He's got a huge toolbox of these things. Our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, so arms and alarms, another great figure of speech. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. Doesn't that sound beautiful? So here, we have even more figures of speech. So this one's called personification. Personification. That's a long one as well. This is when you give human qualities, so personal human characteristics, to something that is not human. In this case, it's war. Visage means face, so grim-faced war. So Shakespeare has taken war and turned him into a man with a grim face, whose wrinkles now have been smoothed out. You can imagine war as having an angry, sneering face that wrinkles as he frowns, but things are good now, so his front has been smoothed. And now, instead of mounting barbed steeds, a steed is a horse, barbs are like ragged spikes, like barbed wire, to frighten the souls of fearful adversaries. We're still talking about war personified here. War capers nimbly in a lady's chamber. And this is pretty funny and kind of dark imagery. You can imagine this dark, evil character of war dressed in black, capering nimbly in a lady's chamber, skipping around happily to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. Lascivious here means lewd or sexual, lustful, and a lute is like a flute. So here you can notice lots of alliteration. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, look at all these F's and S. This sounds like he's spitting. He's saying this very angrily. He capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. Notice the L's and the S's here, all sounds that are happy and merry. Lots of alliteration, lots of contrast. But let's take a pause here. Aren't these weird things to be thinking about? Like, it's kind of dark and a little demented to be imagining war skipping around a lady's bedroom, isn't it? So we're learning about Richard here. We're learning more about the character. He's a bit strange, and it gets weirder. Here we go, line 15. But I, that am not shaped for sportive tricks, nor made to court an amorous looking glass. I'm not one to look lovingly into a mirror. A looking glass is a mirror. I, that am rudely stamped and want love's majesty to strut before a wanton ambling nymph. I, that am curtailed of this fair proportion. Curtailed means deprived or reduced. He's been robbed of this fair proportion. I think he's talking about his face. Cheated of feature by dissembling nature. Deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world, scarfs half made up. All of a sudden, Richard is describing himself. He's deformed. He's been barely half created. And that's so lamely and unfashionable that dogs bark at me as I halt by them. He's so ugly that dogs bark at him as he walks by. And he actually doesn't even walk. He halts by, so he kind of limps or stumbles in a halting fashion. So what's going on here? All of a sudden, we know a lot more about Richard. We know that he's not happy at all. He thinks he's ugly. He doesn't belong in that lady's chamber scampering around like grim-visaged war. And he's really he's angry too. Listen to this. Why I, in this weak pipping time of peace, have no delight to pass away the time, unless to spy my shadow in the sun and descant on mine own deformity. So he's resentful of his appearance and of this pipping time of peace. Pipping could mean the sound of baby chicks, since all he can do to pass the time is to look at or spy on his shadow in the sun and sing or riff about his own deformities. Notice the sun pops up here again. You could be referring back to the son of York. Remember we talked about the son of York and how Richard sits in the shadow of his brother? We have the shadow. He sits in the shadow of the sun, obsessed with his ugly appearance and his shortcomings. Okay, we'll pause here and pick up in the next video on line 28. But isn't this interesting? Who is this deformed guy? And is he actually deformed, or does he just think he's deformed? It's a peaceful, glorious, sunny time. Why is he so angry? So many questions. Okay, part 2. It's coming up.